The year 2025 hasn't started off very well for the state of Florida. The red tide continues to bloom at a level never seen before. While the FWC daily sample map hasn't marked Sarasota as red yet, along the coast of Sarasota, Nokomis Beach, and even as far north as Bradenton, we're starting to see dead fish, bad smell, and health complications. There's a red tide algae bloom outside of Cape Coral, Florida that's about the size of Cape Coral, Florida. Winds out of south have pushed it further north, which means that the few beaches in Sarasota that hadn't been affected by the red tide yet are now going to be severely affected. We've already seen dead fish on our beaches and an overwhelming smell of death along the coast. The real estate market is definitely not looking good in Florida. In the Fort Myers MLS, over 3,000 properties have had price reductions over the last 7 days, up from 2,600 a few weeks ago. And that's now in the winter time, which is the peak season for real estate in the state of Florida. Things really are not looking good here. And to add to all that, many of the international tourists, like Latin Americans and Canadians, are now outright boycotting travel to the state of Florida, if not the United States as a whole. I think at this point, most of us understand the reason why this is happening, so we're going to skip on elaborating into those details. But we do understand that for the most part, Canadians are not happy traveling to the United States right now. Canada alone makes up over 2% of Florida's total tourist numbers. The state of Florida sees about 140 million tourists. About 3 million of those are Canadians. Over the last few years, the number of Canadians coming to Florida has plummeted, and we can assume in 2025, with changes that we've seen in politics, that those numbers are going to continue to plummet even further. It seems like the only reason Canadians are coming to Florida is to sell their properties, which means they're never going to return again. The state of Florida also sees over 700,000 tourists from Mexico and 1 million from Brazil every single year. With laws like SB 1718 and other changes in the United States, we can assume that Latin American travel will also be significantly reduced. And while I don't have figures on travel from Asia, that number is considerably down, possibly less than 30% of what it was the previous year, at least judging by the metropolitan area that I live in. That means that roughly 1 in 20 tourists that used to come to Florida are not going to come here. That's a significant number. So not only is Florida seeing a significant drop in international tourists, many of the state's coastlines are still damaged from the hurricanes. The red tide bloom this year seems to be among one of the biggest we've ever had, with a far-reaching area affecting a lot of Southwest Florida's coast. All that will deter people from coming to Florida. Many people had plans for weddings and other events in Southwest Florida. The hurricanes delayed that, and now they're trying to make their plans work out during this time of the year, and they're finding that the red tide blooms are the heaviest they've ever been. Things are really not looking good for Florida to start off 2025. Tourism being Florida's largest, if not only significant industry, and it is now suffering greatly from all angles. It doesn't seem like with hurricane destruction, red tide, and many people boycotting the United States, Florida will be the epicenter of many of these culture wars that are going to result in hindering the state's economical progress, since the state solely based its economy on tourism at this point, or at least it's the biggest industry in the state. Another huge moneymaker for the state of Florida has been education, student visas. Many foreigners have been coming to the state of Florida to study here, and this has driven a considerable amount of economical power to the state of Florida. But we have had waves of people leaving the state. First, when Florida became politically charged, a lot of people left the state. Home prices, insurance prices climbed. Another wave of people left the state. SB 1718 scared away a lot of immigrants from the state of Florida. Then we had the hurricanes. Now we have the red tide again. And of course, now we have Canadians evicting the state of Florida. It's been one wave after another of people leaving the state. Check out this black truck right here. This guy's got some anger problems. What filled in the void that was left behind in residency, particularly in apartment complexes here in the Sarasota area, were students with student visas. There are several educational facilities that have been attracting people from India, Brazil, even other parts of the United States. These academic establishments have been bringing people to the state of Florida. In Bradenton, you have one that's sports related, you have the arts one here in Sarasota, and you have a medical one in Lakewood Ranch. These are just some of the establishments that have been filling in the void in apartments, for example, rental units that were left behind when many people left the state. Many apartment complexes in this metropolitan area are having a new problem, and that is finding enough parking spaces. Student housing means higher population density per unit, 3 to 4 people living in the same apartment to work together to pay the rent, and this has filled up some of the voids that were left behind by the masses that left the state of Florida. The students are mostly going to want to live in trendy areas like Lakewood Ranch or off of Fruitville. These so-called luxury apartment complexes that feature all types of amenities like gyms and pools. Now the snowbirds, they're buying condos and single-family homes. Many times we've seen mobile home parks as well. There's a struggle right now in mobile home parks that I've been covering in the state of Florida. You guys know what the deal is with that. Basically, developers are going in and getting rid of all these mobile home parks. They're many times doing it with unethical business practices. The combination of all these factors, from the business practices, the cost to insure properties in Florida, and the anti-Canadian sentiment now, we're experiencing that many people that own properties here as snowbirds are now considering selling those properties, and we're seeing the number of price reductions increasing throughout the state of Florida because there's just too much real estate available. So now we're not in the stage where we were a few years ago where the market was tight. There wasn't enough inventory. There was a rush to get a hold of properties. Right now, we're at a stage where the supply is much larger than the demand. And for many Canadians, they're currently in the transition of trying to get rid of their properties in the United States, not only with the notion that the Canadian dollar is worth significantly less, and now that money will go further in Canada, but simply they don't want to spend their money in a country that they feel disrespects them. Welcome to the rest of America, Canada. This is what Cubans, Mexicans, Guatemalans, Salvadorians, Hondurans, and just about everybody else in North America has been experiencing. So welcome to the party, Canada. And hey, by the way, you're whining quite a lot. It's only been a few months. We've been dealing with this type of crap for decades in Latin America. I would really say to Canadians that I personally wouldn't let politicians in the United States determine where or how I spend my money. But apparently a lot of Canadians are starting to boycott Florida and the United States because of politics. Me personally, no politician is going to tell me where I can or can't spend my money. You guys may know that I have had some rough experiences in Alabama. I still go back to Alabama whenever I feel like it, stay in hotels, eat their food, and do whatever the crap I want there. And whether people there like me or not, I'm completely indifferent to it. You know, you don't have to let politics control where and how you spend your money. You can spend your money wherever you want to, however you want to, but unfortunately many Canadians are deciding to jump on the bandwagon of banning Florida. I've even started to see an increase in anti-Florida hate on my videos. Like if I hadn't visited Canada and thought it was a great place and said many great things about Canada, but simply because my videos were out of Florida, my channel is now being attacked by Canadians who want to come to my channel to hate on me for being an American, even though I went to Canada and said beautiful things about their country, even to the point where it made many Americans jealous. But that's the world we live in today. People jump on these bandwagons to let politicians control where they spend their money and how. And unfortunately for us who are interested in economics and social issues, we have to deal with the reality that people are very easily manipulated. And unfortunately for the state of Florida, those manipulations result into people not having enough money to pay their bills because people are boycotting the state. Alright guys, so a while ago I let this guy borrow my Bentley. There it is right there in traffic. This guy was supposed to wash it for me and bring it back to the garage. Where do you think I catch this guy? Look at him. He's driving around in my Bentley acting like it's his. He was supposed to wash it, put it back in the garage for me, but unfortunately you can't let people borrow your Bentleys. Take a look at this image. On the right, we have a landscaping company, and on the left, we have a construction site. How much of Florida's economy do you think Latin Americans support, particularly undocumented workers? Whether it's a landscaping company or a new construction site, I invite you to come to the state of Florida and step foot in any construction site and tell me if roughly 80% or more of those people are undocumented or not. So like I said, 2025 has been a horrible year economically for the state of Florida. Many Canadians feel that if the Canadian dollar drops significantly, it would make sense to dump all their investments in the United States and turn it into liquid money. Even if real estate prices in the United States are not the highest right now, if their Canadian dollar continues to decline, it would be a good opportunity for people to sell their properties, which means even larger amounts of inventory are going to enter the market because of Canadian and Mexican people who own real estate in the United States that are going to be trying to dump it to make their money stretch further somewhere else. Now, for most of us, when we look at money, you have $100 bill in your hand, we think, what can I buy with $100? But for people who have a lot of money, when they see a $100 bill, they don't see what they can buy with $100. They see what money they can generate with the $100. With $100, I could put a man to work all day and generate $200 or $300. So a lot of the people that have money in the United States from Canada and Mexico, which is significant, are now considering extracting their money from the United States market and taking it somewhere else and moving it somewhere else. And this is going to lead to even larger percentage of people having to decrease their properties' real estate values because everybody's bailing out. And of course, the state of Florida is always the epicenter for these type of events because the state of Florida is a place where people internationally come to quite often. They buy real estate here. And when situations like this happen, the largest fluctuations are always in the state of Florida. Even a couple years ago, when the real estate market in Florida was booming, many people portrayed it as economical growth in Florida. I was like, hold on, let's hit the brakes here. Many of the people buying real estate in Florida right now are of the Hispanic demographic. People from Venezuela, Cuba, people leaving Miami were buying real estate all over the state of Florida. I was one of the first people to say, hold on now. This isn't money and growth from within the United States. These are people from outside the United States that are pumping money into Florida. A lot of people thought that with SB 1718 and many other changes that were happening in the United States, that Florida's Latino population would shrink, and the complete opposite has happened. In fact, as of right now, we're starting to see a new influx of people. Many people are taking apprenticeships as student visas or other type of opportunities to get a visa, maybe an apprenticeship, maybe a student visa, and they're coming to the United States with a false pretext of why they're coming here, and they're coming here to work. Now, these are not uneducated people. The vast majority of them are white. You wouldn't tell the difference by seeing them in public. They're well educated. They already speak English. They come from wealthy backgrounds. They're not working in landscaping jobs. They're working behind the counter in a nice suit. For the most part, most of the anti-immigration pressures in the United States have revolved around the notion of Latin American immigrants. This is really where the sentiment comes from anyways. But feelings and sentiments aside, while everybody's focused on that particular demographic of immigrants, Russians, Ukrainians, Brazilians, Chileans, and every country you could think of, Latvians, Romanians, Bulgarians, Greek, if it's a planet Earth country, they're coming to the United States with student visas, travel visas, business visas, apprenticeships, the list goes on, to the point where, like I said, in my apartment complex, parking is at a complete maximum capacity because the amount of students, quote-unquote students, that are coming to the United States from all these random countries. But regardless, even when you look at the demographics that are being targeted by immigration, let's not forget that at the end of the day, 80 to 90% of the people that step foot on a construction site are undocumented, and that hasn't changed anything over the last few years. We saw SB 1718, Trump's first administration, second administration of Trump, and now the governor of Florida signed yet another immigration law after law, proclaiming that they're going to stop and put an end to illegal workers in Florida. But today, I drove by this construction site, and I'm pretty sure, just like this one and every other construction site that we've driven past today in this video, the overwhelming majority of the people working there are undocumented. So there's a lot of hypocrisy about what they're doing, what they're going to do. And as you guys know, I have family in many different parts of the world. I have a large family, and the influx of people coming to the United States illegally is not coming to an end. As of today, 2/14/2025, I know people in transit illegally into the United States, despite the fact, the notion that people think people are leaving the United States or they're not going to keep coming here. Laugh out loud. People are still going to come to the United States illegally. Why they're doing it, I have absolutely no idea, but I'm just letting you know that the influx of people into the United States doesn't seem to have an end anytime soon. A lot of people think that when they see the economy get destroyed, they will change their minds. Boy, are you mistaken. Hate does not have logic. There's no logic behind hate. Look at states like West Virginia, Maine, Alabama, Mississippi that have consistently done everything they can to drive everybody out of their state that isn't native born. Not only do they have hate for other nationalities, they also have internal regionalism where they don't like people from other regions of the country. Look at states like Alabama, Mississippi, and West Virginia. They have the highest crime rates in the case of Alabama. They have the highest homicide rates in the case of Mississippi, the highest overdose rates in West Virginia. Do you think they care that their states haven't progressed because of their anti-Hispanic or migrant or regionalistic sentiments? They don't care. Hate doesn't play by logic. Many people assume that when they see the economy crumble, they'll realize how great it was. No. They would rather see the United States literally fall to crap, like much of the South has at this point, and continue to hold on to their sentiments of let this crumble in our hands versus handing it off to you so you can do something better with it. So this notion that people are going to wake up to the reality that these things are great, that's never going to happen. Hate is hate, and hate doesn't go by logic. You know, when I first moved to Florida in the early 2000s, Canadians were kind of everywhere. Most of the mobile home parks were 25-30% Canadians. Crap, I know mobile home parks that were entirely Canadians in Naples, Bonita Springs, and I'm sure that was the case here in Bradenton and Sarasota as well. As the years passed by, we saw less and less Canadians, and now with this new situation, we can assume that Canadians will stop traveling to the state of Florida. They're choosing places like Cuba, Mexico, and other international destinations. We're literally seeing international dollars that would have came to the state of Florida going to other countries. Canadians are hurt, and it doesn't seem like they're going to change their minds. Clearly, the effects of hate and people not getting along and not liking each other are negative, and we see them around us every single day. And despite the fact we can see these things taking place and clearly identify the damage that comes from these situations, it's really not going to change anything. People know that there's a detrimental effect to their sentiments, but they don't care that their feelings are hurtful to other people and, well, even to themselves. But again, they don't care about the collateral damage. For the most part, we can see ourselves in the state of Florida losing a lot of our international tourists, and that means businesses are suffering. Hotels are not going to have enough people. Restaurants are going to be empty. People who work gigs like transportation for tourists are going to suffer as well. The real estate market is going to be affected for sure. The state of Florida is struggling with so many different challenges. Laws that seem kind of absurd in a state that needs a lot of real estate development. Hate for people that are coming here with good intentions and contributing great to the state. We're starting to see real estate markets tank with inventory increasing and prices decreasing, price reductions at record levels. Things simply are not looking good for the state of Florida, and it doesn't seem like anything good is in the future. The red tide continues to loom in our coastlines. If the hurricane destruction and the red tide are not enough to keep you out of Florida, maybe the hate will. So hurricane destruction, the smell of dead fish, empty resorts, what were once vibrant beach towns with people from all over the world today, well, even the vibe is off. People seem sad, down, and depressed, economically overwhelmed, and well, like I said, the vibe, the essence of Florida itself doesn't even feel the same. A state in decline.